Let's go.
Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So, about 6 years ago, I was having lunch like 3 blocks down the street here with this guy named Ivan.
I'm gonna say, yeah.
And Ivan had about 10 or 12 people working on this app called Notion in his office, and I hung out with Ivan, and I was asking him about how they were thinking about enterprise, how they were going after it. And he said, you know who you should meet is Christina, and we just used their product to get SOC 2 compliant. And I was like, SOC what? Now you're here, thousands of customers later. How's it going?
It doesn't get easier, you just go fast.
All right.
It is always hard.
All right. Well, let's talk about the very beginning stage, because I think this, for a lot of people that are thinking about starting companies or wondering like where the market is going, it's kind of the most interesting bit. Vanta has a pretty interesting founding story. When you were trying to think about what to build in this early days, you didn't come from a traditional security background. You weren't a CIO at some company. And yet you found your way into this area of data compliance and enterprise readiness. Take us back. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so there's, like I think all good founding stories, there's 2 versions of it, both true, and you tell them kind of in different measures. The first version, which is true, was I was a product manager at Dropbox trying to launch what at the time was a new product, Dropbox Paper. So like Dropbox's version of Notion, but it's worse. Talked about that at time too. Anyway, and ran into the product because it was separate from the rest of Dropbox, had none of the security or GRC functionality or like platform teams from the rest of Dropbox. And I was told on the eve of launch, like you can't launch because you don't have SOC 2, and I learned what it took and like literally ran screaming from the room. Like sometimes I tell the story as like, and then I was brilliant and I decided to found Vanta. That's not what happened. I was like, this is insane. You're telling me like this is Dropbox in 2016, height of its power. I have to give up the like 15-person engineering team for a year before I can tell if I have product market fit. That seems like a bad trade-off. Anyway, I do think though that was like an important part of the story because there was like a little bit of prepared mind. Like that's when I learned what like SOC, that was my like SOC what moment. And then having left Dropbox a year after that or so, and really for kind of just like reasons I can't explain, like naive reasons, wanted to start a security company. Seemed really interesting, seemed like something I wanted to learn about. Was like, look, if this doesn't work, but I spend 5 to 10 years learning about security, like, I mean, I'll be sad, but actually that's like not the worst outcome. I'll have at least learned a ton about something I care about and think is important. Hopefully it works. And so went around and talked to startups about security and generally found that, well, many people, it's easy to say startups don't care. I think they care. It was just really hard to prioritize because again, like back to the Dropbox Paper thing, when you don't have any customers, it is very hard to be worried about losing their data. And in fact, your biggest concern is not, oh, when I get customers, how shall I secure their data? Your concern is, how the heck do I get customers, right? And that was kind of dismal for a while. So there was like the wandering and the wilderness phase of founding a startup. And then found one company, which actually to the big company, I was tiny at the time. It's a 35-person company in Soma called Figma, which you may have heard of. And I walked in, I was talking to their head of infrastructure at the time, this guy Matthew, and I had my list of research questions, which is like, how do you secure your cloud environment? And like, how do you think about employee endpoints? And by the way, I'll explain what an endpoint is, because it's, kind of security people use the word funny. Expecting him to say like, I don't. And Matthew, in fact, said, I do, like, we do this, like, here's all the tools, here's all the practices. And I remember actually just like almost closing my laptop and being like, who are you? Like, why? Like you're like the 10th person I've talked to and no one does these things. And his answer was like, look, we just signed a contract with Google, please don't tell anyone, big deal, again, 30-person company. And as part and parcel of closing Google as a customer, they sent us a security questionnaire. And it kind of asked the same things you just asked. How do you secure a cloud environment, employee endpoints, like blah, blah, blah. And I had no answers to anything on that questionnaire, but that seemed like a bad thing to say to Google. So I wrote answers to everything on the questionnaire, and then I immediately went and did everything I wrote the answers to. And so now it is done, literally. And I sat there and was like, whoa, purchase trigger, motivation, like You are now going to do whatever Google kind of wants you to here, and whatever Google thinks of as good security, you will do. And that is so different from every conversation I've had. So that's the like second part of the founding story.
There's always two stories.
There's always two.
There's always two. So you got started, you kind of found this opportunity in the market. And I remember when we first met, you were 3 or 4 or 5 people
Probably, yeah,
at the
probably 3 to 5.
Mechanics Institute,
Yeah.
which is this really cool,
Awesome.
bizarre kind of like library thing downtown SF.
57 Post Street. You should stop by it.
It's really cool.
You can just like walk in.
I'm pretty sure it's a cult. It's great.
It's great. It's like a good cult, yeah.
And you were first in this market. Now there's a bunch of companies doing things around SOC 2. People know what SOC 2 is. We can actually talk about it here and other types of compliance. But back then, you know, you had just learned about it. It certainly didn't have the product
Everyone thought we
market
were
fit.
insane, and not like good founder insane, like.
Yeah, the struggle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask about trust, because Vanta at its core is essentially a security company. And you were asking these companies to trust you for, you know, handling kind of the compliance workflow for probably the biggest customer they'd ever landed, for the most sensitive deal, for where they were going to take their business. How did you approach those conversations?
Yeah, I think two things in retrospect. One was honestly starting with former coworkers, people we'd worked with, like friends of friends, as much as that sounds like cheating. I mean, it kind of is cheating. But it was really helpful because there was a cohort of people where they're like, I kind of know you don't know a ton about this, but I also know you're gonna like work really hard and you don't like to fail. And I don't really have better options, so like, sure, you know, but it's anyway, it's like you kind of had like that part of the Venn diagram. The other part of it, and I sort of mentioned it there, but the other part was we did not start with companies that had compliance standards, that had GRC or security teams. We started with founders who had nothing. And again, and I kind of distinctly remember the moment in mid-2019 when Slack started requiring SOC 2s of its vendors. And so it was literally founders that were like, I really want to sell a Slack. Like, if I put the Slack logo on my homepage, this will be very good for me. But I need this SOC 2 thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know how to get it. You seem plausible. Like, are you gonna knit me a pair of socks? Like, I don't even know what's going on. But like, I want this so badly and I know nothing and you know something. And I think there was also something to like that place of like very high need, very low knowledge about the problem, honestly, that also helped when the product was so MVP. You know, when somebody who did know things would be like, this isn't for me.
You know, there's actually a lot of parallels, funny to hear that, from how when we started working on WorkOS, where those early customers and companies were just like, I think these people will just be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Just, you know,
Just
shoot. And there's a surprising number of problems where you can solve them just by sheer force of will.
Yes.
I think. If you just are
Just like, don't give up.
Yeah, if you're
It's
just
like software in a nutshell.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. A surprising number of them will crack open if you're just unrelenting. How did you know when you had product market fit? You know, so early on, SOC 2 didn't really have the same momentum.
Yeah.
You were selling to friends and smaller companies. When did it start to evolve and change? Was it a point in time? Was it a
No, it's
evolution?
gradual. I mean, there were like specific moments, but I think the product market fit thing is more of a temperature gauge than a light switch. And then in retrospect, you tell the light switch story, but I think actually the lived experience is more like not that. More, I don't know, whatever the good version of a boiled frog is. There was a moment in the early days when kind of after the Figma story, we're like, there's a little bit more kind of user research stuff going on, but we're sort of like, okay, we can both code and we have enough hubris to think we can build whatever we want. The issue we've had in our careers is we built things no one wants, which is not fun. So let's do as much as we can prior to starting to like write TypeScript, literally. And so we made early versions of Vanta and spreadsheets, and then we're kind of like manual SOC 2 consultants for friends companies. And the first company we went to, literally the kind of the hypothesis or the sort of test was, can we make them a spreadsheet that they don't like throw us out of their office? You know, like, are we at all credible? Can we give them a deliverable they sort of believe in and give them like a SOC 2 roadmap, basically? And then that worked, and so we took it to the second company, which was, we actually honestly just kind of find and replaced the company name, like company 1 and company 2. And that was a test of like, can we standardize this? Like if we give somebody else's roadmap, you know, to this other company, change a little bit on the edges, but mostly not, can they tell? And that worked. And then we got this email from a former colleague that was basically like, hey, here you guys have become SOC 2 consultants. Really weird. Where did your life go wrong? We should definitely get a drink. And also, my company needs a SOC 2. So like, can I like pay you in booze basically to like go, do whatever it is you're doing for my company? And that was one of those, I mean, to sound like light switch, but like light switch moments where you're like, whoa, this person in network, but like heard about this from someone else. Like, I don't even know, we could go track it down, but like they were at someone's house party on Saturday for some reason talking about SOC 2, and this came up and they want it, like that feels good. That felt really good. And so then it became a like, oh, we should probably stop, the spreadsheet consulting cute thing and like start coding. And I think at the time we thought it would take, a year or so to like turn the spreadsheet into code, and it was probably more like 4.5 years. It's kind of misestimated that one. But that was one of the like early trigger moments.
I feel like San Francisco is maybe one of the only places you can go to a house party and hear people talking about SOC 2.
Very true.
Gleefully. Why did SOC 2 get so much product market fit? I think I've heard you talk about this. Obviously, Vanta's been very successful, but also there are like YC companies with 6 people going and getting SOC 2 compliance now. It used to just be a big company thing.
Yes.
What happened?
I do think SOC 2 is incredible product market fit. We can talk about it as a product, but I think it's an incredible product market fit. And I think the thing that felt obvious when you really poked at it in 2017 was more companies would get SOC 2s if it did not take so much, if it wasn't so costly. And by costly, I kind of mean dollars. Like it was probably, 50 to 150K all in then between a consultant and an auditor. But the problem was actually you gave up a lot of your technical team for a year. Like it was costly in terms of team time. But it was also when you talk to people, it's like, oh yes, I know I need that, or I want to sell to Slack, or in order to sell to so-and-so, this keeps coming up, and so whatever, like, or we're a 20-person company and we're still gonna embark on this give up our CTO for a year thing. And so the thing that, again, I think we saw that was there, but like no one else saw, which I'm still a little baffled by, honestly, was if you made the easy button for SOC 2, a lot of people would want to press that button. And that's kind of what happened. I think as that happened, SOC 2 went from being, we used to call it the like Monopoly Passco collect $200 card, to the entry ticket, right? It's the first step now. You like must have it, all your competitors have it. And then now you need to go through security questionnaires, separate vendor reviews. I also think, honestly, like a lot of like SOC 2 is not immune to the forces of technology acceleration. And so as SOC 2 has gotten more prevalent and accelerated, the pros are there, and the cons, which are very real, are also accelerated and more common. There are some reasonable things in SOC 2. There are some things that are stuck in the 90s and less reasonable in a 2024 software, like cloud software context. And that's all still very true. So like, again, the highs are higher, the faults are larger. But it's kind of the same thing, just accelerated and like blown out.
You have done some things at Vanta that have kind of been atypical for startups. And one in particular is that you waited until you were at north of 10 million in revenue before raising your Series A. A lot of folks will raise at $1 or $2 million in revenue. I want to ask about that, like that decision, and you were faking it till you made it. You clearly made it and built the thing. Talk about that company building step and why you, specifically that one, why you decided to do that.
Yeah, a couple things. The plan was to raise a Series A at 1 to 2 million. Like that was the plan. And there was definitely like a couple freak out moments where you're like, oh my gosh, we're never gonna get there. I think then we kind of got there, and I mean, everything was burning fires. And they're the good fires. We have too many customers. We don't have the support for them. We can't find enough auditors. But also, like everything was burning to the ground. It kind of felt like the lived experience was everything is broken. And we still had basically the whole seed round in the bank because we charged annually up front. And so some of it was just like, you're like, okay, if I need to go finance whatever, I'll assume I'll like basically dip out of the company for a month. like, that's not gonna be good. You know, like, that seems like a terrible use of time. We don't need the money. We need 9 quadrillion other things that, like, money can't really solve easily. We're also terrible at hiring. So you might be like, why didn't you hire? And we tried, but we were just, like, made every mistake in the book 7 different ways. You know, so there was a little bit of, like, I actually feel remiss financing because, oh my God, I just need to solve the customer success problem, by which I mean we had no CSMs and no customer success, and that was very bad. So some of it was that. Some of it was I got really lucky and started my career in an early stage venture firm. And so I knew the trick to fundraising is that the best way to raise money is to not need to raise money. And VCs, in fact, just want to fund businesses that don't need funding. And so, you know what people like funding more than $1 million ARR Series A's is $2 million Series A, ARR Series A's, and then $5 million. And so there was a bit of like, it's not like we had a window that was going to close. The window was actually just going to extend, and it was going to get easier and easier so long as the growth continued. So it was like a combo of those. I think also there was a bit of, again, at this point, people still didn't know what SOC 2 was, thought we were like, I don't know, twiddling our thumbs into the ground. Like, this was not a market, and we so knew it was. And we knew there would be copycats. We kind of didn't want to go raise a big splashy round yet, because we're like, oh, that's just going to invite a bunch of competition. And so, like, let's hold off on that. I think I pushed that one in particular too far. But there was like a moment there where I am glad we didn't be like, oh, we got to $1 million in 6 months, and this is a great business, and we just can't fulfill all the demand, because you're just kind of inviting competition then.
I want to ask about competition too.
Yeah, I got so many thoughts at this point.
Yeah, so WorkOS is kind of in a similar spot. When we started working on it, people were like, what are you?
Good luck with your life over there.
I had a friend that sat me down, just like an intervention, and was like, are you sure you want to be doing this with your life?
Yep.
Still pretty sure. Back then, we didn't have any competitors. Now we do, and Vanta, you have a bunch that have emerged since then. It's no longer a crazy or heretical idea.
Yeah.
How do you think about that? The competitive market? How do you
Which level?
How do you feel about that? Yeah.
Actually, I think I've gotten to like more Zen state, but I've gone on a roller coaster.
Yeah. Walk us
Oh,
through that. How you felt initially, kind of how that's maybe been incorporated to your company building, and how you stay ahead of them.
Yeah, I think got the whole roller coaster. I think in the early, it did not feel like it in the early days. In the early days, it felt like we were going as fast as possible. I don't know, like you're on a motorcycle or like face press back. And that's what every day felt like. And in retrospect, we were kind of lackadaisical. We thought we were smarter than our customers in some cases. We definitely weren't. And so when the first really good set of competitors emerged, one in particular was actually just really good at listening to our customers and hearing what they hated about Vanta and fixing those things, which is an excellent strategy on their part. And there was a part there that I was hurt, but it was kind of a self-directed hurt. It was like, oh, we've heard these things. Like, we know these are pain points, and we have not fixed them. And shoot, what are we doing? So there was that piece. Honestly, parts of it felt very unfair. Actually, that same company also took screenshots of Vanta and sent them to a dev shop in Mexico and got a product back. Copied down to the placeholder text. My childhood hero, Sally Ride, was in 2 compliance products at one point. And, that just feels unfair. But I think also on the roller coaster, it does, everything, or a lot of things are fair in capitalism. Fair is not a useful concept. And so, that just doesn't matter. And there's parts that are annoying, but, I think it's a deep reality. And the most important thing is how you deliver for your customers, and you are only as good as the last thing you shipped. No one cares we were first. No one cares we made up the thing and someone else copied it. Does not matter to someone who is trying to get their job done on a daily basis. And I think internalizing that was kind of emotionally tough at times, but also reality. It's reality. If you can ignore it if you want, but it won't end well. I think it ultimately really caused Vanta to get way better at what we do. We got way better at listening to customers, way better at not overthinking what they said or what we thought. We kind of had this we had at our worst, we had a tendency to like overly intellectualize customer problems and our solutions. And this just like got rid of that in a way that I think is actually very helpful. And just like a lot more resilience too. Whereas now when there's like, this like, kind of a new competitor, slightly less often than there used to be, but there's kind of a newer one in the last 6 months, and you're like, oh, okay, we've seen this playbook. Like, you like know to act fast, you know what to do, like some of their critiques are halfway valid, and we should like take the feedback and fix them, and some of the stuff they're saying is just nonsense, but like, here's why we are confident it's nonsense, and go combat that in the market. And I do think Vanta is a lot stronger now than we were in, call it, like 2021, when we were just more Midwestern about it. It was just kind of like, people are being mean to us on the internet and saying untrue things. Like, why would you even do that? And like, it doesn't matter. They're doing it, like, what are you doing next? And like, in our case, like, hopefully not saying mean things back, but like combating it in more productive ways.
Yeah, I think, especially as a founder, it just stings when you see that
you're just like,
happen.
that's just, like, what are you doing? Like, do you have any self-respect over there?
Yeah.
But, like, again, not a useful question. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of it, so we've had a few kind of similar things. It's been amazing to watch like a competitive dynamic in the landscape. It's kind of like someone writing unit tests against your business model.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out where you're vulnerable.
Which is kind of useful. I mean,
yeah,
it's annoying.
it's hard when you see something you're like, oh yeah, that's totally something we didn't think about, or that you are trying to exploit the area of our business that we haven't built strength in. But sometimes without that, you don't see it, or you can't prioritize it.
Yep.
So it does make you more resilient.
Yeah.
Started with SOC 2.
Mm-hmm.
Well, SOC 1, SOC 3. What else have you guys built?
Oh God.
SOC 12?
No, hopefully never. We started with SOC 2 again, not because it was the best thing out there, but it seemed like in 2017 it was the closest to the like baseline reasonable standard. It was like the first thing companies got, so it was the first thing we started with. Again, very much pros and cons to it, that I think are like even more true today than they used to be. The idea was never to build a SOC 2 factory. Actually, at times talked about it as a SOC 2 factory, which is like a very demeaning way. But some of that was because, again, like, in the beginning, we also didn't think a SOC 2 factory was a very good business. It turns out it's actually a surprisingly good business. But it was like, that's not what we are trying to do. The idea was, can you use the economic pressure, motivation of like revenue growth and new customers to go drive a bunch of security practices into a company, and then build those over time, and along the way, make the demonstration of those security practices, the audits, the questionnaires, not these like, well, I talked to an auditor 6 months ago and they wrote me this PDF, and therefore you should trust I have good security practices today thing, which is like batty when you think about how software works, but something that's real time and continuous. And so, anyway, all to say, we've made it for us really easy to add new frameworks and standards to Vanta, because honestly, it was because we'd have these prioritization discussions about like, should we support TSAX, the German automaker standard? And we'd just get into these like prioritization conversations that would like drive everyone crazy. And so the strategy was instead, how can we launch a new standard in 4 days? And then if it takes 4 days, we never have to prioritize these things. We will just be able to do them. So we support about 3 dozen standards today.
Wow.
Added a new one today.
Wow.
There's a team that just does that.
Just-in-time development.
Try on the standards thing, because when you're like, should we add TSAX or this other thing, and then also trade it off against other product work, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to sit through these meetings.
Vanta's in this, well, I'm glad you guys do. So we all don't have to. Vanta's kind of in this magical point when companies start going up market, and we're at Enterprise Ready Conf. What does it mean for companies to be enterprise ready too? And what have you seen in that life cycle from the smaller companies you serve all the way through the largest ones?
I think so much is helpful or not. So much of how I think about this is through the lens of like, what do your customers want? And that obviously, like, and I also try to tell founders like deeply, like, your customers better than I do. I can help you try to reason, should you get a SOC 2 now or later, but like, to the extent you can, just ask your customers. They will know better than I will. So I think there's some amount there. I think when we've thought about it, alongside customers, compliance is a piece, security posture is a piece. There's a ton of just application-specific work that I know you all are deep in, and today was deep in. A thing I think I have come to appreciate over the last year being at Vanta is how much the go-to-market motion changes when you are talking to like true enterprises versus a mid-market company, certainly versus like a startup or a SMB.
Can you say more about that? Yeah, talk more about the go-to-market, because you guys have been going up market yourself.
Yeah, and kind of the idea is, I think some company, like if you think about, I don't know, the window of companies you serve, and going up market for some companies means just like shifting that up in terms of headcount or however you think about up. The way we're trying to do it is like we will always serve startups, and so you're actually just extending this, but you're extending surface area. And I think on the go-to-market side, and this all sounds kind of obvious, but like a startup buys very different, or products very differently, buys software very differently from a like WorkOS-sized company, from a Dropbox-sized company, from JP Morgan. And a lot of the go-to-market roles tend to be specialized along that too. And it's not, sometimes it's like a Rolodex thing at the very top of the market, like who knows the CIO of JP Morgan, such that you can go get steak dinners with them. But I think it's actually less that and more just you understand how organizations like that make decisions, and you can help them make a software purchasing decision, say.
All right, we're going to open it up to questions to all of you in just a few minutes. I have one more question for you. There's been a lot of talk recently about PG's Founder Mode article. I don't know if you folks have read this, but kind of talking about founders getting back hands-on versus delegating to execs or being hands-off, inspired by a talk that Brian Chesky gave at YC. As a founder yourself, how do you feel about that? How does it fit into your work?
I feel like
how does it show up for you?
Like not ask founders and ask the people who, like execs who report to founders. I think if you ask people at Vanta, they'd be like, yeah, Christina gets my work and other people's work, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's awful. I think the honest answer you'd get. I mean, like almost all of, I think, leadership and management, like very personal to the person and not personal as sensitive, just personal as specific. I think I am someone where my confidence comes from knowing the details. This is like true in all facets of my life. Sometimes that's useful, sometimes that's really not useful. But it is very hard for me, for a concrete example, to like have opinions on, a user conference, we run without like really understanding what goes into like that conference at every step of the way. Otherwise, I just get very milquetoast. I can be like, that seems good. That seems good. I can like justify that. Like, sure, it's like not at all useful. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think I like to think it works for me, and I think actually that puts onus, and like maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. To be clear, we will see. But to the extent I think it does, I think it puts onus on me when I'm like hiring folks to make that clear to them, so they have a sense of what the environment is and isn't, and like can decide accordingly.
Just make those expectations clear.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not like there's a good and a bad way. It's just like just like don't want someone to think they're walking into one thing and get another.
Totally. Yeah. With that, I'd love to open it up to you all for questions.
You mentioned hiring like a couple times, but I would love to hear how your hiring process has evolved as Vanta has grown from like a smaller company into a much larger one.
It's changed a ton. Any specific like phase or piece of that you're interested in? So like
that's a great question.
Say something useful.
Yeah, I guess.
Hopefully.
How do you still interview all of your employees individually, and like how? And it sounds like since you said confidence comes from the details, I would assume so, that you have like a level of depth for that, but maybe what questions you ask and what you look for in their answers.
For sure.
How many employees are you right now? That might be helpful.
550.
Okay. Yeah.
We do not interview everyone anymore. Sometimes I read stuff on the internet and I'm being like, man, I'm doing this wrong. But I did up to a point, and then it, like the recruiting team staged an intervention. Actually saw a Brian Chesky talk where he's like, so the team stages an intervention on you, then you need to keep going for 2 years. I did not do that. That might be the right advice. I don't know. But you need to go like 2 years post initial intervention. But what we do is we call it a principals interview, but right, it's the like interview every single person goes through, and again, not a like it's much more of a communication and ways of working interview, and not in a like, we have good ways and you're bad if you do not do these things, but if people do not do these things, they are unlikely to be successful at Vanta, and that is painful for everyone involved. So we do that and scale that. I think the first time we'd made that and scaled it, we actually think the interview worked, but we tended not to follow the results, as in like, we'd be like, oh, someone said no on that, but that's fine, we'll hire them. We like ended up parting ways with like all of those people. It was like deeply painful, and I'd always, of course, go back and look. That was like an annoying founder mode thing. And so from that, we still do the interview, but you're like, okay, hiring manager, if there's a no on this, you just need really strong countervailing signal. Like, take the no seriously here. And it's not a blocking no, but it's like, you better know what you're doing sort of no. So anyway, we do that. I do interview all Director Plus candidates. And the primary thing, and I tell people this, and they still, or people tell this to the candidates, and it still doesn't, for some reason it all still works. But the like primary thing I'm looking for there is, can this person come in uncertain? We have some data, but it's bad. It's going to be conflicting. People want you to do lots of things. Like, I don't know, it's a startup. It's like kind of messy. Can they come in and set a direction in that? And they're like, it's a new job. They want to do it well. They want to be right. Like, can they come in and set a direction for the team? Because again, I think this is the place where we have hired like excellent people who are very smart. And when your instinct in that environment is, can I get more data? Can I try something? Can I do another analysis? Can I like wait 3 months to see? Like, you turn into a spinning top, and then your team turns into a spinning top, and then like everybody is a spinning top, and it is very sad. And so just that, like, can you be like, look, I actually don't know the right answer, but we're gonna try to walk west, and if we run into a cactus, we're gonna turn, great. But like that instinct in people. That's another thing. We just messed up for a while, and it was so painful because people tried so hard, but just wouldn't decide anything. Because it's hard to make decisions.
I have now a very visceral image of walking into a cactus.
You know what I mean?
Which is what it feels like to build a startup.
Yeah, but like
cactus
then
after
you're like, well,
cactus.
that's not the direction. We
Yeah, you're like,
turn the
oh,
other
let me turn a little bit to the left and keep going.
Versus the like, I'm just gonna sit there and like not
right,
decide.
right, not go anywhere.
Yeah.
Other questions? What else we got?
How, as you have been going up market, how do you convince customers that are, 1, 2 times or multiples of your size, whether it's people or revenue, to like take the chance on your company, right? Like they're looking at you like as a startup, how do you convince them to make that bet?
It's a great question. A little bit of everything all at once, which I feel like it's the actual strategy for lots of things, even though it sounds like a terrible strategy. But the like customer references, word of mouth, do they know someone, right? Like social proof of a different sort than the founder version, but like there's like a social proof angle. Very practically, we do this with startups too, run a ton of POCs, like proofs of concept, where we're like, here, just use the product for 2 weeks. I mean, we'll check in and we'll give you goals to accomplish it, but like just use the thing and like see if it works for you. And we do it because we're high confidence it will, but also like it's a great sales tactic when it does work. But also in the expectation setting, like that piece. I think there's also how do you find a narrow version of the thing that is less risky, right? So maybe we're not like running the GRC program of the entire enterprise, but like they acquired something and like that thing needs one of the frameworks, and it's like a little, you don't want to mess it up, but if you mess it up, you're not putting the whole company in jeopardy. And so figuring out those sort of like de-scoped opportunities to make it less risky for your champion.
Super interesting how you mentioned sort of like just making the process of adding a new framework, whatever, super easy. I think you've done something similar with integrations, maybe.
Yep.
Curious if you have any guidance on making something like that a success and making sure that it pays off.
Oh yeah, when you say success, internally or externally?
Either. I like just generally investing in a framework and then being able to do something a dozen times, 24 times, and that being kind of a differentiator, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So integrations, I'll tell that story because it's sort of interesting. Okay, so the way Vanta works and other knockoff tools work is you like integrate with various systems, you pull metadata out, and then you can run basically control checks, but like sort of unit tests over the configuration of various tools. Core of the product, great. One of our competitors in particular made a bigger integration push when we were kind of being a little Midwestern and scared. I say this as Midwesterner. And we realized that the number of integrations became like a buying criteria. And I was like, well, so-and-so has more integrations than you, so ergo it's a better product than yours. And we spent like 3 to 6 months being like, no, that's not how you think about it. Like, it's integration, like depth, not breadth, and like I can add a bunch of logos, but it won't really add any automation, and we have much deeper. Like, we made our poor salespeople try to do that until they were blue in the face, and it did not work. And so, kind of just got annoyed. Oh, it was that, and then on the product side, again, we were like, well, should we build like the 5th HRIS integration in the sequence, or should we, improve our sharing workflows, whatever, right? Like, it was this like constant prioritization and trade-off. And it felt like nothing was, things were getting done, but it was just really frustrating. And so the integration push came from, again, you're like, we should add 200 new integrations in a calendar year. I think we had like 50 at that point. So this was like, Christina made up a random number, and I'm like, yep, I like made up a random number. Do whatever you need to do. You care about logos. I understand that is not the philosophically correct way to think about this, but like, just do me a favor and logos for a year and just go. Might have been 100. Anyway, and it took like a quarter for that team to kind of get through the like, this is weird, made that up, there's no pathway to hitting it. Like, they like kept drifting back to like depth rather than breadth and logo count. And then we got it, and then they just flew. And then it was funny, it was like that whole team had wings, and they were like, oh yeah, and I think they added like 220 last year or something. Like, they just like had a couple unlocks and just flew through it. And it worked. It worked better. It like worked better than I thought it would. And then anyway, competitors took ways, like they still haven't caught up, which is like kind of wild. It just worked way better. And now I think whenever you do these, you introduce a lot of debt. And so this year is like the year of depth and being like, oh, when you connected Cloudflare, you wanted more than like just the users? That makes sense. There's a bunch you wanted out of Cloudflare that's not that. Let's go and do those things. But I don't know, I think that was a bit of, again, kind of like stupid goal from the founder who doesn't know what's going on. But then also the like, you guys can do this. And like they did, and then they got that confidence, and that was like kind of infectious.
How many do you have now? How many integrations?
330 plus.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny actually, and then actually this year, because they like did the like, well, we really need to do depth next year, and you're like, yeah, totally. And this year, now they keep like going back to logo count, and you're like, no, depth. Like we've got to like fix for these. But it's funny, it's like kind of one of those like treadmill in a good way, where you're like, right. Oh no, but there's so much like good stuff that happens when we add a new one. Yeah, Don't you want to make 330 like 360? And you're like, yes, but no.
They're probably, we've always been about adding lots of integrations. That's
yeah.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. Any last burning questions for Christina?
So when you think of compliance, it usually comes in at the tail end of the product development lifecycle. So you as a business, do you have thoughts on helping customers make the right decisions up front, like when they design the products, right, the first PRD and so on?
Yeah, I'm laughing because if you talk to my sales team, who I deeply love, they'd be like, well, you should really start it on day one. Like, definitely you need that before you know what product you're building. That may not be great advice, or like sometimes that's good advice, sometimes it's not. My advice is always like, you should do it when your customers want it. And so that is like, again, that I guess depends who your customers are. The example I used in the early days is Airtable. Like, they didn't need SOC 2 until there were hundreds of people, because it was such a prosumer, bottoms up. Like, it took them a while to like start talking to CIOs, who would generally call them and be like, who are you? And like, why do you have all my company's data? But that was much later than Modern Treasury, you might know. It's like a startup that does treasury services via API. And they got SOC 2 compliant when they were like 3 founders on a couch, no product. But it was because in order to launch their product, they needed a relationship with SVB. SVB wouldn't talk to them without a SOC 2. And so they did it early. And so I think it is like a lot of things. I do think like following your customers and when will they like not work with you, or when are you spending your team spending a bunch of time objection handling, basically? Like that is the time. Otherwise, you've got other stuff to do.
Christina, I know that you have a bunch of other stuff to do running Vanta as well. I know you're super busy. Thank you so much for
Thanks so much
taking
for
time
having
to be
me.
here with us today.
Let's go.